Chimamanda Adichie's biting humor shines through in the tale Jumping Monkey Hill, which is based on her difficult time at a workshop for young African authors.
I was furious when I wrote that story. And I don't usually write about myself in my fiction. I like using people's stories. But this one was really me. It was my rage. It was the idea that I was sitting there in this workshop and somebody was telling you what your story was. Somebody, an Englishman, an Africanist, was telling you what an authentic African story was. You know, an African story had to somehow be about, it had to be sort of overtly political, it had to deal with violence or poverty. You know, you couldn't write about people falling in love because, you know, it's minor. In Africa, terrible things are happening. Because people do manage, in the midst of all of that horror, to fall in love. And I think it's the job of fiction to remind us of people's humanity. So I think it's really important to talk about the poverty and all of that. But, you know, the human beings as well who are laughing and cooking and walking and finding ways to keep their dignity. And I think it's what fiction should do, find ways to show us that.
Do you write from a place of rage often?
No, I find that it's actually quite bad for fiction. So when I teach creative writing, I often say to my students, if you're angry about something, don't write when you're angry. Wait until you can put the anger aside. It gets in the way of fiction.
Do you often mine your own life for your stories?
No, I try very hard actually not to write about myself because there's just a sense of sort of automatic self-preservation that kicks in, and then I start to, you know, I don't think I'm very honest when I write about myself. I don't think that generally writers are, and which is also why non-fiction is very suspect to me.
Adichie was only 26 when her debut novel Purple Hibiscus was published in 2004.
Purple Hibiscus, a very auspicious beginning. Well received right out of the gate. Did you expect it to do that well?
No. I thought 5 people would buy the book, and I think because I had such a hard time getting it published, I had sent, you know, you need to find an agent before you get published, and to find an agent was so difficult. I got so many rejections.
Really?
And they got progressively nicer. So usually it started off with the form letters, you know, dear author, thank you for your submission, this is not right for us. And then it became sort of handwritten notes. Dear Chimamanda, I like your writing, but. And I noticed that many of the buts were about Nigeria or the setting. Nobody wants to read about Nigeria. Why don't you set, I'm one of the agents, and I tell this story all the time, who said to me, why don't you use the African material as background and set the story in the US? And I remember thinking, well, the African material is the whole book. I don't understand.
Yes.
but
hello, that's the point.
I know, but I still, you know, but you know, you so want to be published that there are things you're willing to consider. So when I got that, I really did think, well, how can I use the African material as background? I did think about it because I wanted it to be published. But then I realized, you know, it would be stupid. And so I just kept trying and trying. Finally, a woman who was just starting out as an agent was willing to take a risk with me and signed me on. And it didn't take her very long to find a publisher. But I also remember thinking that even my publishers, who were fantastic, but I think the expectation was this is a good African book which will maybe appeal to, you know, when people say things like, for lovers of Africa, this is a good book, as though somehow, you know, as though somehow if you don't like going on safaris, you can't get this book, right?
Her 2006 follow-up, Half of a Yellow Sun, focused on the Biafra War, the civil conflict in Nigeria in the late 60s that led to the deaths of nearly 2 million people. The book sold 650,000 copies in Britain alone and established Adichie as a literary superstar.
Got you, Adichie!
The accolades rolled in, including the Orange Prize, a $60,000 award given to female writers, and the MacArthur Fellowship, aka the Genius Award, a $500,000 grant.
Where were you when you received that news, and what went through your mind?
I was in Lagos, and it was my birthday.
What a great gift.